Go ahead, start. Alright, so we're going to have a joint personnel and ordinance committee meeting this evening. Before I get started, I want to put out a couple things, just to reiterate in case anybody didn't hear it or didn't see it, so that there's not any confusion or anxiety. The proposal that I sent forward for the committee to look at, the numbers that are on there are not set in stone. There's numbers to show the plan and how it works. So there's some people who have asked about the numbers. Don't worry about the numbers. The Budget Finance Committee, they're going to look at the numbers and kind of hash all that stuff out. And they'll get that. We're just creating a plan and a structure. So with that. Second. Can you call the roll?
Justice Coward?
Here.
Justice Hall?
Here.
Justice Pankey is absent. Justice Penders absent. Justice Rayburn?
Here.
Justice Smith?
Here.
Justice James? Here. Justice Watkins? 5-3. Is that once? On both? Except one.
All right, so on the agenda, the first thing on here is the code listings. So this was something that I created, and again, all of this stuff is negotiable. We can discuss it. If you have any issues with it, bring it to your elected officials. Like, get with me. We can break some more stuff down. We need to separate more stuff. We need to add anything additional if we need to, and so forth. But on here, the intent was to get everybody on the same page so that everybody that has a similar job gets paid a similar amount of money. So there's not confusion or any contest between any one job or one office or any of that. The Sheriff's Department, I broke everybody down under SO codes from 1 to 6. I've got the bailiffs under a subcategory of the Sheriff's Department. The Road Department, they go from R1 to R6. JPs are just S1. Any admin officials, we have a C1 through a C4, the C4 being up to administrative assistant. Then the elected officials being executive 1s, sheriff E2, and then the judge E3. Based on that, I actually went in and created a spreadsheet that has everybody broke down into codes. Again, there's some in here where I didn't have enough information to actually put a code for them or put an actual dollar amount for them. Either I didn't know who the person was or what sheriff, and which person doesn't matter, but I didn't know enough about them because in some positions, like the judge, she gets paid half her salary, the county general, half the road department. So again, the budget committee, they can hash out the final numbers. I would just create a plan. For this, there's a starting salary. Every 2 years, you get a raise. That way, similar to most other government agencies, military, things like that, you can tell from the day you start a job to the time you get to 20 years how much you're going to make, when you're going to get your raise, and all that. The gray areas on some of the sheets, that all that indicates is where that position right now is being filled by somebody, and that's how many years of service they have. So again, there's no names in here. I can't tell you who any of these people are, but if you were to go to, let's say, the circuit clerk's office, the record specialist class 2, whoever that is, has been here for at least 4 years. So that's all that gray area is for, just to annotate that. Any questions, guys?
Can I ask a question? It goes through 20 years.
Okay.
We have a few employees that are 20 plus years.
Okay.
Are y'all talking about starting them at that salary and still giving them every 2 years?
So this is going to have something we have to discuss with the budget committee as far as the numbers,
Right.
because I just ran it for 20 years because if I got any wider, it'd be really small and nobody would be able to read it. Right? Half of us can't read it anyway because it's so small. I'm all for going beyond 20, but there probably needs to be a cap at some point. But we don't necessarily have to have a cap. I mean, it's something we can always debate and kind of hash out.
But you wouldn't go back and make them start out at the first.
No,
So go ahead and go to the.
Yeah, it's wherever you're at.
Okay.
If you're 20 years, you're 20 years.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
There's no reason to start you at square one, right? And that's why I put, like I said, the gray areas in there so you see where people are already at.
I have a question, if
Yeah.
you will. So, in looking at that, I know you put down some that, in my office particular, there was a decrease in pay that they're receiving now. And I understand they'll pick that up based on their longevity. Is there any time to what the job descriptions are and what that pay scale should?
So again, that's gonna be, the actual pay is gonna be left to the budget committee.
And then
For them to figure out the
would
numbers.
it be, and would that be budgeted into your salary based on how many years they are?
So, yes.
So that
Based
that
on
would
that,
come
what I
back,
think you're asking is kind of what Teresa
that would come
just
back
asked.
to would it be an option of the elected official on how much you pay right now? There's a cap. Is this a cap? Or is
So
this
this,
not?
yes, so well, it's a cap as far as at that year amount. So if they've worked 6 years, that's the amount. If it's 8 years, they go up. It goes up from there every 2 years, they get a raise.
So my question is, so, like when I took office, I had a 20-plus employee that was not receiving the cap.
Okay?
She wasn't receiving as much money that was approved for her salary. That's the question I'm asking, is that still going to be left up to the official on the
So-
range of this is the minimum and this is the
So based on the
maximum?
proposal I made, no. There's not a area that you can start here and in here based on that. It's all based on how many years you've been, and what your actual code is based on your job title, what you do. So, that help?
And how would you determine on, what each position, I guess, based
So we're
on
gonna,
job
so,
description, what their pay should be? Who would determine?
so we're
that?
gonna have to rely on the elected officials some for that, I think. Because there's, I was telling somebody earlier, let's say I go into your office, you've got 4 ladies working the front desk. I may not necessarily know as a JP what they do from one to the next, right? I may not know how much responsibility one of them has versus another. You've got Kim in the back, she does mapping complete. She's gonna have more responsibility probably than some of the ladies that just mainly do the assessments, right? So we're gonna have to depend on you to help us out to figure out where they fall into that. So,
What about new employees that come in that have experience at another job? It's the same.
and another job in the county or
Or
another-
say a position that's identical
so
to
experience,
that.
experience somewhere else
Yeah.
outside of county. So that actually gets us into this part right here in the ordinance that I wrote. There is actually a line in here where, once we get the HR department up and running, if you have a new employee, let's say that you have a new hire, they have college degrees that may or may not have been required, or you have somebody that has pre-existing experience somewhere else, and they come in and you say, hey, I think this person needs to be started out at a higher position, or a higher yearly amount, or whatever the case is. Plead your case with the HR department, and they can present it to us from a completely unbiased perspective. And they can use their experience as an HR person, right? And they can say, here's why we think this person needs to be started out here.
So you're saying that the salary is negotiable?
It's negotiable because, if you have somebody that's got 20 years experience somewhere else, should they get paid the same thing as somebody that's 18 years old, just got out of high school and is getting their very first job? Right?
But then that's what goes back to me asking if you have a minimum and a maximum of that job.
For when they first hired, yes, but as far as once they've been here going forward, it's wherever they're at on the chart.
Just on what you just said there, so basically like law enforcement, lateral transfers, a lot of departments pay, give lateral transfer. Terrace County, Arkansas, they can pay you up to 5 years. So under this plan here, if I hire a deputy that's got 5 years experience or 5 years complete work history at some other department, he would start in what a 5-year deputy would make.
So I would say bring that up with the HR rep, plead that case with her, and then if she, I'm sure she would
I'm
agree
just-
based on that, then I would say that they would have to present it to us, and then we can make a decision on that as a court.
Right.
So, I think that would probably be fair, based on my personal opinion, but again, it would be up to everybody.
That would help a little bit with hiring a little bit more experienced officers sometimes, just as much as.
Because again, it's based on years of service, and, if you're doing a lateral transfer from another government organization, why not, why make them start out at 0?
I would like to say, if I can say something, I do think we need to be careful about telling people that they'll be able to predict what they're gonna make in 10 years.
Well, I'm just saying people are already working based on this as long as
Well,
nothing changes.
even someone who is here now, because you're relying on future court reports to honor what you're doing here. And it'd be bad for somebody to rely on that, what you need to say is this is what we're doing right now. But, as far as, committing that the Quorum Court of 2033 is going to agree to what we did 10 years ago, that may not happen.
And that's where this comes into play, because that's got all the rules based on this going forward.
Well, I honestly have to look at that, so, but what I can tell you is, if the quorum court in the future is coming up short on their money, they may not honor that.
And that's included in here as well. All of that's included in the ordinance. So like I said, the ordinance piggybacks off of this. And so as long as this flows, as long as we're still making the money we should be making, as long as this is abided by, there's no reason why this should change unless for some reason the quorum court decides it needs to be changed. Even future bonuses, future raises, end of year raises, bonuses, so forth like that, it's all covered right here. So,
Yeah, well, the reason I say this is when you started, you said just like the military, somebody would do what they're related, that's really not the case.
okay. So, any other question?
I just, a little bit more clarity, so on the years of service, again, would that be an option for the elected official to give them the maximum or minimum? Or is that, is that a definite part on that?
Like I said, I would say it's a
I
definite.
asked Michael, when this discussion first started, there was a discussion about not tying the longevity pay to the salaries, because that has to be budgeted every year in everyone's salary. And it's a little bit concerning to me because you're saying, well, this is what it's gonna be, but you can bring this to the court or HR and have them present it.
Well,
and we can change it. I think that's where we're at today.
Right. I'm saying, like what the sheriff said, when you have a new hire, if they have previous experience, then you can figure out, based on the HR's input, you know, where do we think that person should fit? Should we offer them a higher starting spot, right? But once they're hired on, once
So
they've
it would be
accepted.
like you would offer them, okay, we're gonna pay as if you've been here for 5 years. Are we gonna give them that 5 years and then the increments will go from there forward?
Right. If there's justification for it. Like the sheriff said, if you have somebody who's been a police officer for 5 years and they want to come work for us, why should we start them out as a day one employee?
I guess I could use one of my employees as an example. She took a $3 an hour cut in pay to come to work. And so she has a lot of management experience. How would that apply in my office? I mean, who would determine?
So that's what I was saying.
How would that
I would take it, go to the HR rep and say, here's the employee, here's what their experience is, here's where I would like to see them start out at, and here's the reason why. And you can discuss it with them, and then if she agrees with you or whatever, then she can just come to us and say, hey, unbiased opinion, here's said employee, here's their experience, here's where their elected official would like them to start out at, here's all the facts. Right? Because she's completely unbiased at that point. She's just representing the facts.
Well, and I get what you're saying. I guess I'm only concerned, and I'm just thinking, coming from being an employee, if I'm gonna bring somebody in that's worked somewhere else for 15 years, they're gonna start out at 15-year pay. Then the person that's actually been here for 15 years working for Miller County, how do you explain that to them?
I mean, I'd like to take a little bit different approach to the question. And I'm not sure whether y'all covered this aspect of it or not, because this is something we've discussed a lot of times in terms of salary for a particular employee. We set a maximum salary. Does that obligate the person in charge, the constitutional officer, to pay that amount, or can they start them at a lesser amount at their own option? Because you don't want to start everybody at the first top pay from the day they walk in. You want to have room to make some raises, and we've always allowed that officer to make that judgment of their employees, start them maybe at a lower rate, and if they perform well, then they've got room to bring them up without coming back to court.
Right. And again, you can propose that with the HR rep, say, hey, you know, yeah, this person has 15 years, but I want to start them out at this rate. Again, that's why you have that conversation with them, and you guys can hash it out. And plus, you also have somebody else that has experience, and y'all can have that conversation. And you don't have to worry about waiting until the next meeting to come to us and say, hey, here's something I'm thinking about doing. What do y'all think? Right? And again, this is just one proposal. I mean, if the rest of the people on the committee can always come up next week or in a couple weeks and say, hey, I have some more changes or ideas I'd like to present. This is just a proposal that I came up with. Right? So I'm all about making changes if need to or having alternate approaches. But like I said, this is just something I want to present and see what everybody thought. Because I think we need some kind of structure.
Well, we appreciate all the hard work you've done with that.
So, employees who say they've been here for 20 years now, and they're not up to where they should be in their salary chart. Okay, we have employees now that you said you grade out.
So the gray part, all that is showing how long that person's been here, that's it.
Okay,
That's the only
is
thing.
your proposal to go ahead and bring those employees up to that?
The numbers that are in here are not a proposal, they're just to show you how the chart works. The Budget and Finance Committee is gonna come up with the actual numbers. I'm not trying to, that's why on the letter right here it says, the salaries are not intended to be presented as actual salaries. They're here so you can see how it works.
Right.
So the Budget Committee, they're gonna change all the numbers probably. Whether they go up or down, that's up to them. Right, they can do whatever they want with it and propose whatever options they want. But that's just on there so you can see from day one to 20 years how you could potentially progress based on that scale. That's all that is. So, and I realize there's some employees that make more than they do on here, and there's some probably make less than they do on here.
I guess another question I would have, and I understand what you're saying, is if you give them that pay based on 5 years, are you gonna give them vacation based on 5 years? But I can see that question coming up.
Right. And the only problem going to the Quorum Court, if there's not something set in stone like that, if you do it for, let's say I do it for, the Officer Jim comes in at 5 years, and I go back next time, I got Bob coming in, and they don't allow it. I think that would create a hardship, you know. If it was something set in stone where you could lateral transfers and stuff like that would be more conducive trying to go forward.
And then, like with anything else, anytime you have a major change like this, you're gonna have things along the way you don't realize, right? Unintended consequences. So, I mean, I can imagine we're probably gonna readdress this again throughout the year, or maybe next year, and say, hey, we didn't realize that vacation might be an issue, right? Or this might be an issue. How do we address it? How do we add this to it? Do we add it to the ordinance? Do we amend the ordinance? You know, what do we do? Right? Because again, none of us can think of all the answers. And we're not gonna think of all the problems.
Michael, since I'm new here, I'd like a little background on how all this developed. I mean, were you requested to create this? I guess you're mainly trying to set up the advance the person can expect from year to year. It's the ordinance deals with the standardized increases in pay. I understand the starting may vary, but I mean, I guess I'm wondering why is that? It seems kind of complicated to me, but what prompted this? I mean, you say you wrote this, right?
So basically just trying to get a structure, because right now we don't really have a structure. You know, if somebody wants a pay raise, and let's say the elected official comes and says, hey, I want a pay raise for this person, or I want a pay raise for my office, you know, then if we give them one, then somebody else can say, well, why'd you give them one, you give us one. And there's no structure at all.
Okay. So in the past, there was no, you could not expect a certain percentage increase from year to year, or?
There was no longevity, not any. We tried to pass that several years ago, and it didn't go longevity.
So there's been no, I mean, you wouldn't, an employee would not know what to expect. Well, the ordinance states that, you know, this may be, you know, we may do this, but we may not, depending on the, you know, the finances.
Right, but it's, the rest of it, the way it's written, it's intended to fall within the parameters so that we shouldn't have to ever worry about it. And so there's one part in here, if you notice, it actually says that, you know, the treasurer's supposed to have a 3% invested every year at a minimum. And we already do more than that, right? But that was put in there as part of that kind of protection so that we don't have to worry about going back and saying, hey, well, we don't have the money now we're going to have to cut everybody's pay. You know, so it's intended to try to prevent any future pay cuts at all, and if anything, address future pay raises and increases. Question? You got quiet.
Well, so you're not planning on having this voted out of committee tonight?
Oh, no.
It's just.
No, I'm just presenting it. It's just something I'm presenting that I worked on, and like I say, if anybody else on the committee says, hey, I've got a better idea, let's scrap this and do something different, okay. You know, if they say, hey, we like it, but we want to add this, okay.
What's a good starting spot?
That's all it is a starting point.
It's my understanding that you're presenting it as the personnel committee
Correct.
to the budget.
I'm presenting it to the personnel committee right now.
Right.
Just as, you know, if the personnel committee votes on it and says, yes, we want to do it, whether it's tonight or the next meeting, at that point, then it would go to the budget finance committee for them to hash out and figure out how do we make the numbers work. based on the current budget. And again, they may raise all the numbers, they may lower the numbers, they may get with some of the elected officials, say, hey, this person is making this much according to this, should we bump them up or should we lower them? You know? And again, the great part was only in there so that I could try to cover some people and say, as many as I could at the time, and say, here's how many years that specific person has been in that spot. You know, regardless of what their name is, I don't care what the name is, but that position is filled by somebody who's been in the county this number of years. So they can just glance at it and say, okay, this person makes this amount of money because they've been here this many years. That's where they're supposed to be. Or they're lower, we need to bump them up, or that's actually higher, so let's either leave it there or let's lower it.
So I guess part of your intent was though, because some of my staff, you have their, on the position, you have the amount that it pays lower what they're currently making.
And again, that was just,
And so that's just for example purposes.
Exactly.
That wasn't to
None of that was intentional.
compensate for the years they worked.
None of that was
Put them on
intentional.
this end.
yeah, none of that was intended, it was just numbers to make the chart work, and that's it. There was no intent to cut anybody's pay or give anybody a bigger pay raise, none of that. It was just
Okay.
to make the numbers work and show how it flows.
Is Justice Pankey still working on another one also? I know she had told me at one time.
Carl?
I know she's been ill.
Last I heard she was, but I haven't heard that she is.
Where are we at on the 23 as far as the 23 budget? I know there's some offices that we already addressed raises, and then there's some that we haven't. Do you know where we're at on that?
I don't.
Do you know which offices have been addressed?
I have to go back to the capital.
I think Mary was working on that.
Jimmy,
Yeah,
what was
let's-
your question? Which office is what now?
For the 23 budget year, what we're current year, we had looked at some offices and given some raises to elected officials and to the offices, and some we've not gotten to yet. So that's.
Well, I know the treasurer's office is not.
Well, it's my understanding that at that February meeting where the budget was approved, that nobody was gonna get raises. They were bumping up the 26 people to that lowest salary, and that raises would be discussed later. And if I understood it correctly, is they were gonna do it through the personnel committee and then the personnel committee. But I wanted to do it at the Quorum Court meeting. I have two questions because I'm just trying to learn how all this works. At that budget, at the Quorum Court meeting in February where the budget was approved, when were the Quorum Court members given that budget that was approved? Were y'all handed that as you walked in that night? And I think two of them answered it that night. Justice Hall and Justice Wilson voted against it because they hadn't been given copies of it yet. And if y'all got it before then, did you know that some of the offices were given raises after the rest of the elected officials were told that there would be no raises considered?
I did know that, but what I said then, and I regret that it's not happened, was that I wanted to get everybody addressed in the first quarter, and those who were not covered yet to be given their raises retroactive, so that they would get the money for the full year.
Well, I think if you go back and listen to that meeting that night, you will hear that no raises were given. Everybody was just brought up to a level playing field.
Well, there
Okay.
were raises given.
But that's not what was said, correct, to the audience?
I was aware that there were raises, and I remember what you're talking, I can't remember the title, but I remember what you're talking about. But again, what I wanted to do was get everybody looked at the first quarter of the year, which were passed. And if someone is given a raise, make it retroactive to January 1. And I regret that that hasn't happened, but it was given to a committee to do, and that committee was not been able to, for whatever reason, to get that.
Right, but it doesn't sound like we're getting any closer to getting it resolved.
I agree. I agree.
Well, that's why I wanted to get this proposed and get it out as quick as we could. Which our attorney was on spring break for a week with his kids, so it took a little while to get it back. But as soon as I got this back, that's when I called Stephanie's office and said, hey, let's get this on the book so we can get the ball rolling.
So when the raises are given to the other offices, your plan is to go back and retroactive to January?
So I would say that's something that the budget committee can discuss and bring to the court for us to definitely consider. So, I mean,
What I'm talking about is separate from
Yeah,
this
that's-
plan. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put it out, I'm sorry.
I mean, I like what he's done. I see some problems with it myself, just based on 20 years of being here. The needs of the county vary a lot from year to year, and the money varies a lot from year to year, so setting up a structured system that's gonna be in place every year is tough to do. I'm not saying it can't be done, I'm not against it, but it's tough to do.
Well, we worked against the abbreviated budget year this year because of various things, losing our computers, and being unable to get any facts to work with.
Yeah, but there's also pencil and paper and the past budget. I mean, you had a budget from, I don't know when the computers went down, but you had a budget for that month that you could have worked on. Your office.
Be that as it may, it is, you know, the budget committee generally works with the structure of going through each individual budget. We were unable to do that.
We presented budgets for all that time.
I'm sorry?
We presented budgets even when the computers were down. Did we not? I mean, I did.
You did about
There were some budgets presented, and per my normal argument, a lot of times the budgets are presented way over what's reasonable and doable. And generally, the full court goes back to starting point and figures out what we can do. And what we can do is based on anticipated revenue, because a lot of this extraordinary revenue that we've received is not repeatable. The dollars are there, but if you go spending them like they're always going to be there, they most certainly won't be. And for the first time in my experience of 30 years on this board, you may see some pay decreases or some layoffs because you cannot pay more than what you can consider anticipated.
And we all understand that. I mean, we know the money's not there, but it's just
The thing,
how it's being handled. I mean, I don't want to call out names, but I was told in a meeting, I presented my budget, and then I was told, that's not going to happen, we're going to do that, but yet raises were given. I was told I couldn't ask for a raise, but some of the other offices got raises. And, I mean, why was I told that if that was not going to be, I was told nobody was getting raises, and then there was. And I'm just trying to understand the system, so I know how to move forward from that.
Well, I don't know how I can help you understand the system other than we're going to work through individual budgets and figure out where to go.
All right. Do you know when that's going to happen?
I couldn't tell you, I'm waiting on what Mary's working on to see what she comes up with.
So, I mean, we could wait another, I'm not trying to be helpful, we could wait another 6 months. Is that what I'm understanding? I just need to know the process because no one explained any of this to me to begin with. I've heard it from this one, I've heard it from this one, and then nothing is getting done. So I just need to know how to prepare. I'm a very organized person, and this is very unorganized, and it's got to drive me crazy.
It was a very unusual budget year because of the computer problem. It did. But I wanted us to have everything back on track by now. And I'm kind of frustrated like you that it's not been done, but it's in the hands of the committee that's working on it.
Normally when we do a budget, Penny, in the fall, we have like this, the current budget and then what you're asking for. That way they can see any changes. And we just didn't have that this year because we couldn't pull up where we were because we couldn't get on the computers to see where we were in each line of the year.
We would also, each elected official would meet with the quorum court at a specific time and go over your budget. And if they wanted to cut a line item, you could say, well, I got this and this and this. And they said, oh, okay, well, we better leave that there, you know.
So
So
we couldn't pull that
they didn't
out.
get through that.
To do it in an organized fashion is a very time consuming thing. We ordinarily start September, work all the way to December.
So I guess the question is going forward, are we gonna go back and look at the budgets now? And see where we are? Like,
My
you may-
understanding is what Mary is doing right now. She's working her way through the budgets, but I have not been privy to any of those meetings.
Okay, because I mean, like Justice Howard said, he would have hoped by now that we could have the first quarter gone back and looked at the individual budgets and going forward, get with each individual office to see where their employees are, see, as far as for giving increases. Because again, back at that February meeting, there were pay raises that were given. Some offices didn't get anything. And again, the treasurer's office, I believe
You
this
know,
is.
it's been this way for 30 years. If you give 2 raises, everybody wants to know why they didn't get a raise. And it's always been that way, and you become kind of immune to it because no matter what you do, you're not gonna make everybody happy.
And I understand that. I understand you can't make everybody happy, but I'm just saying, let's, right, and let's just be fair to everybody. You know, and I'm gonna speak for myself because I know I'm a 22-year employee, and it's very frustrating to me personally. I can't speak for everybody else. When you see other offices giving raises for people that have not been in office out here.
And the last meeting, we were told by the personnel committee that they weren't gonna meet with anybody individually. So, I mean, who are we supposed to meet with?
I don't know about that.
I mean, they said that, correct?
It was in the extension office, they said it's on the record.
So, I guess what I'm hearing is some concern here is that this plan that you have seems like it's gonna take a while to work it where it's agreeable to everybody. What I'm hearing is here's the part that really bothers me about it is if this is gonna be the structure and that's what the pay is gonna be based on the structure, then it doesn't work if you can come back and go through the HR department and individually come and ask for raises for certain individuals. You're right back where we're at now.
But that's only when they first get hired on. That's only when they first come in and you don't want to start them on the ground day one. If you say, well, you got enough that, you got a bachelor's degree, it's 4-year degree, but just
So
example, right?
basically,
If you
you're
want to start that
hiring
person at 4
somebody-
years instead of 0 years, you can start them at 4 and then they go from there.
Well,
It doesn't
I
mean.
guess I'm just, here's my thought on that is that most of the employees that we hire do not come out of high school 18 years old. Most of them come from somewhere else and has had years of experience. I just see that being a very gray area on
But
how
again,
much.
that's why you can bring to the HR department and say, I want to offer this employee this starting salary. I want them to start at this number of years because of this.
I would have used myself as an example. When I come to work here, this pay was in structure. I have 20+ years experience that I would have felt like I should be making the top pay for.
And if the quorum court can afford to pay that and the HR department voices that to the quorum court and they want to put you in that spot, then that's for them to decide.
Is HR, let me ask you a question, is HR gonna be that involved in the salary decisions? Because the way it's always been is the quorum court sets that amount. The elected official hires a person and decides what they're gonna pay them within that.
So I only put the HR part in there for the cases where you have somebody that you're wanting to pay them more because they're coming in. If it's one of those cases where I don't want to start you here, but if you're going to start here, then just like the sheriff's department, they got a brand new deputy, a brand new corporal comes in. You can tell them where they're going to start out at, right? But if you got somebody who's been with the police for 10 years in the city or somewhere else, then you would have a valid argument potentially to start them at a higher point.
Which would come back to the quorum court making those decisions.
Right, but instead of
How much,
having several elected officials bombard us at the quorum court meeting with all the data of why we need to have it, and then have us go back and have to kind of hash it out and have more meetings to decide, do we put this person at this point or not? You can go behind the scenes in a way and meet with the HR rep and say, here's the reasons I want to start this person out. They can discuss it, and then you bring the one meeting, lay it all out there, and then.
Could you not do that thing? I'm not a police officer. Y'all have a rank structure, correct?
Sir, I'm sorry.
You have a rank structure, lieutenant?
Yeah, rank structure, yes, sir.
So could you not bring somebody in at a
You wouldn't want to bring someone in new, like just someone that worked over at the city and bring him in supervising, the deputies that's already here. You wouldn't want to bring them in as a corporal. Now, but you could, if on, how he's going on this on this pay structure, I guess if it would be all right with the Quorum Court or whatever, you could bring him in at a 5-year salary or 10-year salary, if that was what was decided here. But I wouldn't bring, and I did bring brought in the chief deputy, and I brought in the lieutenant over my criminal investigation division, came over in that position. Of course, both of them's 30 years, or 20, well, Devin is 30 years, and Paul is 28 years, 24 years. They came in at that position because they're over a department. But I wouldn't bring a cop off the streets, come in, put him supervising the deputy that's already been there, no matter how much time he had, unless there was actually a need for it in that position.
I see a problem in your offices here. If you have a person that comes in, and let's say Kathy, I'm just using it, that Kathy's found somebody that she really, really wants, and she's gonna pay this one person, say, $300 or $400 or $1,000 or whatever, more than the other people in the office, and they're making this amount, and she wants somebody to pay this, you're gonna have a lot of dissension in your offices. Because it's just gonna cost them.
But that's when it comes back to the actual code based on what that job is. If you're
But
saying,
you said,
I'm advertising this
you
position.
said that they may want that, they may have a degree, but that has something to do with whatever they're gonna decide to pay them, because that's not in your scale here. You understand what I'm saying? You're gonna have a lot of dissension, and then it's gonna come back to HR or whoever and decide, oh, no, you can't do that, Kathy, because they're gonna be making that or whatever. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think so.
Okay.
And like I said, we can always make changes to it. This is just a
And I don't want to get
beginning
into
proposal.
it as HR to decide, well, this person, she really deserves that. I don't think that's our job to do that as HR, to decide, well, you can pay them $1,000 more than this schedule.
So the reason I put the HR in there is not for them to decide anything. It's to have just an unbiased opinion that you can come to the court and say, here's where I think this person needs to start out, and here's the reason why.
I just don't think we need to decide.
You know,
Now, we don't have to do that, but like I said, it's just,
That's my opinion.
I think the elected officials should always have the option, because some of them may not want to use it. So, I mean, I know you're just throwing that out there, but, elected official doesn't have to use it.
I have a question, and again, I keep reverting back to the February meeting, because that was the last one I was at when the phrases were introduced. Did you all get a copy of the proposals that were presented from the elected officials for their offices?
It was thrown out.
Did you all get a copy of that at that February meeting?
The return, you're saying the budget request
Yes.
had been returned, I don't
And
think
then
I
it
did.
I don't think so.
So you guys never got that?
That was part of the computer problem. I mean, I think the budget request went out, maybe y'all sent them back in, and we never
We're
had
talking
them.
about February.
We had them,
We
we
heard,
turned
February.
he's talking about last year.
I'm talking about in February, there were some proposed salary increases presented by the offices at that meeting.
Yeah, I can't remember that, but I'm sorry.
Going forward, what I was hoping, we got a lot of this federal government largesse, free money.
Yes.
There's no such thing as free, but supposedly free money. And what I'm hopeful of is that we can utilize that for projects within this courthouse that are long-term projects, that repairs the courthouse to bring it up to the standard it needs to be. Because always we're in a balancing act between the absolute needs of stopping this leak in this window and fixing the drainage problem underground, fixing the elevator, and all the other demands of payroll and things like that. And so when you take your anticipated revenues, and you look at your actual anticipated revenues, what you would hope to do is not spend more than you anticipate. And we have been and hope to continue to use some of that money that came to us from the federal government to address these long-term needs so that they're taken care of for years to come. And then you can more accurately look at pay as much as we possibly can. I would like to see everybody make more money. My long-term fear, and I've watched it happen in Miller County before, and it is that we continue to raise pay until the money that is in our investment fund starts going backwards. We had it up to $3 or $4 million at one time, and that started out from the baseline of 0 back in '92, that we built it up, and then it started working its way backwards, and we started budgeting more and more until I could see the time in the future where we could make it. Because if you don't have that reserve money there, you use that percentage to help make that budget. And I could see a point coming in time where you couldn't make it. And if we're not careful, we can get there. Right now, we've got a fairly nice reserve based on some of those funds.
Yes.
But they're not real, that's not real income. You can't always depend on that coming in every year. So the best way to do it is sit down and analyze it based on needs of each office and pay what we can. Now, there are offices here, of course, that are commissioned offices that have a lot more money coming in. And I've never had a problem with paying those offices a little more money based on what was available, except that you always get this uprising in the courthouse that, well, you didn't pay this office here. This office is Carter County General, and you can't afford to pay them that much. There are ways that those commissioned offices can help the county, that are legal ways to do it. That they spend money in such a way that it helps the county general budget so that you can take care of everything. And that's what I hope we get to, is that sense of cooperation, but understanding that we can't spend more than we have.
Right, and we definitely don't want to spend more than what we have. I mean, that's definitely not, doesn't make sense to do that. And we have been, the treasurer's office has been, as we've told Carla, any expenses that the treasurer's office can help, to take it off of county general, and we've been doing that. We've been doing that. But I guess my question is, again, at what point are we going to, or we just need to just stop asking?
I can't honestly answer that for you because I don't know. If I'm waiting to see what product Mary came up with, or if she has anything. And if not, we may have to go back and working it into the budget committee if she's not going to be able to put up with something. I don't know.
Well, Michael could go with this one.
See on the committee,
On the first one?
have y'all met?
This is the first meeting we've had. That's why I wanted to go ahead and have this meeting so we can get this out, so if anybody want to work on it or change it or make any updates or offer other suggestions, we could.
Before we adjourn today, though, I need to add ordinance to the agenda.
I'm going to go ahead and add one last thing in here so we can cover this and we'll move into the ordinance because we've got about 15 minutes left. The last section here was the overtime amendment. I put amendment on here because I was assuming there was actually already an ordinance that covered stuff along these lines. So amendment names may not be the best word to use, but it basically covers any overtime. And there's one or two options. You can use both options if you want. Again, it's all flexible, but it's just ideas that I kind of tossed around with our attorney to see what we can do that's legal and right, and then he's seen across the state before. One of them was anytime you have overtime, it's covered by comp time, 1 hour for 1 hour. So let's say that the road crew goes out and they have to cut trees on the weekend or in the evening because of storms, right? Then they're allowed to take that comp time sometime within that next pay cycle. The reason for that is we don't want to have a time where you may have an employee who says, hey, I've got 30 days of comp time, I'm taking off all next month, right? And now you're hurting an office potentially because you're down an employee for a month, right? So what I put in here is you can take it for the next 2 pay cycles. If you don't take it, it gets pushed to the end of the year. At the end of the year, you'll get compensated via money instead of time off for that. The other option is that each department be given 3% of their total salaries for the office is like a holding fund to pay out for comp time or overtime. And then based on that, I also put on there that every quarter just have the elected officials just address the one part and say, hey, here's the status of our overtime, right? So just so we have an idea of, hey, we haven't used any overtime at all in the last 3 months, okay? Or hey, we had used 90 hours of overtime in the past 3 months for this, right? Just so we're aware of the status of it more than anything.
The status is in your monthly pack thing that Richard sends out. Have you sent that out? budget,
The budget details?
all
As
that's
far
in
as,
the budget.
as far as the amount, or the value amount. But I was thinking more along, you know, if we had elections, we had people had to work over for X number of hours, and here's why. Or, hey, we had a really bad storm, we had to bring people in over the weekend, cut trees, you know, a month ago, so that's why. Just, we don't have to add that in there, but like I said, that was just my train of thought, of why I put that in there.
I don't know, but once it's in our budget, as an elected official, do we have to account to how we spend the money? Okay, so.
Like I said, we take dollars, that was the reason I put it down.
What did you say? We couldn't hear you.
We have to come in and explain to them how we use our overtime and line. I don't think once it's in our budget that.
Oh, maybe, so, one of the reasons I put that in there was because, you know, hey, we realize, hey, there's a lot more storms, you might use yours up, we might need to increase that 3%. You know, it's not necessarily micromanage or any of that, it's just more to make sure that we're giving you the amount of percentages you need, if that's the route that we want to go. So,
And the other route, 141, I will, no one in the road department will answer their phone if they're going to get a 141.
okay.
I mean, I'll just be honest, but
Yeah.
I would, 3 o'clock in the morning, we got trees down across the road, they're not going to answer the phone. Not for 141.
Yeah.
And again, we can change all that, like I said, it's just a proposal.
But then you have the potential at the end of the year, somebody accumulating 600 hours of comp time, county general having to pay for that, not for.
Right.
Yeah, we
And
did that.
that's
That,
why,
I think we've been in that, I mean, I remember in 17 and 18, y'all addressed that there would not be any more comp time because of that reason.
and like I said, that's why I put it in there, just so, you know, if there is anything like that were to come up, we can
And
address
it's
it
hard
before
for
the end of
us
the
in
year.
the jail to actually address that. We can't. That's why it was actually rescinded for us, because it's hard, being short-staffed anyway, to get someone to be able to take comp time off in 2 pay cycles. And so, that's why we have overtime.
And like I said, we can always address changes, making changes, adding things, taking stuff out, but like I said, that was the intent behind it anyway.
And the 3% of overtime for us would be 81,000, which is a little bit less than what we request anyway, so.
So, any other questions about any of that before we go into ordinance? All right. So, Sheriff, do you want to address the ordinance that y'all proposed?
I'm not proposing no ordinance.
It's not preferred.
You're, okay.
Yes, so, you know, we've been talking with the city, you know, last year, we signed a contract with them to house their misdemeanors, which we do not have to house. But to help the city, when they got in all the trouble with LaSalle, we started housing their misdemeanors. Well, we signed a contract in February, 3 months later, they broke it, they were paying. So we actually had, our attorney had to start working on a lawsuit. I think we got that money, when did they finally catch us up? November?
Yes.
Yeah. So they actually broke the contract. The city is not, they will not, in fact, I have a letter here from them, if y'all want to pass it around. They are not willing to, I'll lock it back though. They want to honor last year's contract. We're losing money on last year's contract, so this is the ordinance that our attorney said that we need to pass. That's the one that passed last time. That sets a rate for them, and maybe we can get them to the negotiating table instead of just saying $5. And they sent the sheriff the same one.
Ma'am?
I said, they sent you the same letter.
Yes, ma'am. I got the same thing. And what this ordinance will do is basically, by law, if the city and the county cannot negotiate a contract or negotiate a price, the Quorum Court has the right to set the price, which is, if we can't come to one, that's what the price will be.
So even we pass this for $65.
We could negotiate $55. If Am I correct, County Judge?
Yes.
But if they don't want to negotiate, then we can hold the people to fire at 65.
Yes.
At 65, they'd have to move their inmates.
Because right now, they won't do anything.
And this way right here would be set in stone, we don't ever, it'd be, and I like the deal of, I don't like the double charge, not double charge, but double standard. You got the felons this price and misdemeanors this price. It needs to be one price straight across the board. You know, mischecking them, it's hard for them to, okay, well, that was brought in on a misdemeanor today, but tomorrow it was bumped up to a felony. And where we could keep it just one price, it'd be so much simpler for us. I think it'd be easier for everybody in the county.
Well, with the care packages that the misdemeanors receive coming in and the high turnover, I mean, we're actually losing money on them.
And the misdemeanors are where we have most of our issues. That's the most people come in that's intoxicated or high on drugs, sick. You know, our felons come in, they usually, the percentage rate of them going to the hospital is a lot less than our misdemeanors because we get so many misdemeanors in daily.
So I'm asking the full court tonight to, vote it out, we need to, use the emergency clause and put it to effect. So he wanted it on the agenda last month, we didn't have a meeting to hear it.
But he's saying that there's already language that it automatically renewed.
It renewed, but not, I mean, it went up like that 3%, but it's not enough to cover the charge of what it actually costs.
But what I'm saying is it legal for us to go up on it?
Yes, because they broke that contract when they put it in last year. We signed it in February, they broke it in April, they quit paying. And we didn't get a check for that for the revocations up until November, somewhere around November of last year.
From the city?
For the back pay.
Yeah.
And that was because our attorney said, we are getting ready to file a lawsuit this week. And that's the only reason they said that we paid it.
And the wording of the contract, it does says either party, the city or the county, can break the contract any time, as long as I think it's a 90-day, with a 90-day notice. Am I correct on that?
But we never renewed that.
Right. I'm just, you know, and if the worst case scenario on this would be 90 days from now.
I gave them a new contract. They came back with that proposal, and that's, you can't get them back to the table.
Oh.
But that's not the one you didn't sign, right?
No, the one I didn't sign was last year, you know, because it went around me to the full court, y'all voted to approve it, so I went ahead and signed it, even though I didn't support it. But that's that contract. Because I thought the beds, you know, the attorney said, you know, the bed's worth $55, it's worth $55. Why are you doing all this staffing? And that was my reason for not supporting it. But now we can even get them paid
So you did sign it? You did sign the contract?
after y'all passed it. And that's that contract that they're wanting to keep in place.
So what are we suggesting that we pass?
It's an ordinance to increase the cost to $55. It's in the contract, but it's under the-
I already read it, but I know things have changed.
some of the more traffic. You know,
Just like that one.
it's frustrating because you know, we step up to help the city, and then they turn around and we're not paying them. And then we're losing money on top of that. So, and I had presented them a contract earlier.
Should they be reimbursing us monthly?
Just-
They pay us monthly. Yes, sir.
So we do pay.
They do pay us monthly. What it was, there was confusion, reason they refused to pay at a particular time, there was confusion on a probation revocation. Because the law says once the misdemeanor goes to see the judge, then it becomes, if the judge sentence someone for 30 days in county jail, the city don't have to pay for that 30 days, that's on the responsibility of the county. Their argument was, since they was on probation, that's already part of their sentence, when they got arrested again, they shouldn't have to pay for it. But we've discovered that they should be paying for it. We've always thought they should pay for it because they give a new case number, because a new warrant is issued, which creates a new case, and that's why they should start paying us. And that was confusion. They didn't want to pay us for a long time for that, didn't they?
But the thing was, it's in the contract that
They had to pay it, yes.
and they broke this contract.
And this new contract that's wrote up, it's a lot, it's a very, our law, we've looked at it, I like the contract myself, and, wrote up by
Jason Owens, the
Jason.
contract that I gave him, when did I give that to him? I gave it to him right after.
February,
February.
maybe.
Months ago.
It was a new contract, and then I just see that letter in the mail.
Might have been a little earlier than
What
that.
is the interlocal agreement that they say automatically renewed itself?
That's an agreement between, the one that we're talking about that they broke last year when they quit paying it, it's between this, an interlocal agreement is between the municipalities. You know, like Texarkana, Arkansas, and Texarkana, Texas can have an interlocal. So Miller County and Texarkana, Arkansas have an interlocal. It's just two governing bodies agreement.
But that stands outside of what we're talking about here in terms of this agreement to house
No, sir.
prisoners.
No, sir. This interlocal agreement really is null and void because they didn't honor, they didn't pay the bill nearly all of last year. And finally, at the end of the year, they sent us a check for all the back pay.
But he said, I mean, his letter doesn't address that. I mean, it sounds
No.
like he thinks
He
it's
wrote
still.
this on his way out to the world, I think. But that right there raises our rates because I can't get them to negotiate.
Well, I understand.
Yeah, so that just, the full court sets the price, and maybe that'll get them back to the table to negotiate.
Are they current?
They are, presently there.
And does that contract say, does it say how often they're supposed to pay us? Does it say weekly or
Monthly.
It does say
By
monthly.
the 10th of each month,
They're to be billed by the 10th of each month, and they have
Yeah.
30 days rolling.
that's what I was fixing to say. We
And they did
invoice
not-
them by the 10th, and then they submit it.
That's actually municipal law.
And they didn't do that last time.
They didn't
Well-
do it, we signed the contract with Jeffy, was it February?
Yes, and, but
February, they
the,
quit paying around April, and
they
they
did
did
not paying the entire, they were paying, but they weren't paying all of it. They weren't paying for the FTAs, contempt court, and the city probation. So they broke it by not paying what they had agreed to.
And
Because I did ask about that, and I was told they weren't paying because you didn't sign the contract, we didn't have a contract.
No, I went back and signed that back in February.
I think that's referring to the juvenile contract.
It is, that's what
Oh,
I'm
no,
trying to.
I'm talking about the adults.
Oh, this is adult.
This is adult.
Totally off track.
So we got a couple minutes till the quorum board meeting starts, I don't know if we can actually go
I
over.
would, I've read through this now, I see no problem with it, I think it's probably what we need to do.
I think Jeffrey needs to say, or wants to say.
Yeah, I got a couple notes here. Obviously, I'm kind of staying here for Connie a little bit. Couple things, section 5, she believes that it should start off in the absence of a written contract, comma, the Miller County Sheriff's Department, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, and then, down in section 8, her note, basically talks about once we file criminal information, what happens now is, let's say TAPD arrests somebody, they're taken over, put in Miller County. They are responsible for that person up until the point that the criminal information is filed. At that point, it becomes a county inmate. Yes?
Correct.
Everybody is correct.
Yes.
Everybody all right? Okay. So when we talk about going back here, I think we had some real question about going back and billing TAPD for medical or dental type stuff there in section 8. I guess there's some questions there as to whether that would fly.
It should say, they're only responsible for the medical and dental up until it becomes our prisoner, then it becomes a county problem, correct?
Right, that's correct.
But in here it's reading that the group that arrested them is responsible for it.
Well, as long as it's their, our understanding would be as long as it's their,
But the way, I'm just saying, the way it's worded, I think it's what he's saying, it says that it's a responsibility of arrest of.
I would agree that you probably need some language there to say, once that information is filed, then they become the county's responsibility. Up until that time, as required by Arkansas and federal law, we have to offer those dental and medical treatments, so they would be the responsibility of the rest of the property up until that information is filed. Am I correct on that?
I think that's correct. That's my understanding of it. I mean, you know, this is always gonna be one of those deals, we haven't tried to collect anything like that before. And I'm not sure what the state and federal laws are on it, but definitely once the criminal information is filed, it becomes a county's problem, if you will.
So we vote to have this go to Quorum Court and then have those changes.
I would think so, yes. I think that it's our responsibility
We've actually been doing that. We've been billing the arresting agency during, up until the point that they become Miller County inmates. And so that basically is.
So I'm saying, it says state and federal law. I don't know if that's state and federal law is. I mean, that's something I've never had to research or been exposed to, or, you know. So, I mean, find out, but.
Well, and I'm sure that attorneys. But we've already been doing it.
Okay.
So what we what's not addressing here is
It's all good,
education.
it's all good. It's all good. We've already been, this is what we have to do.
Yeah, the sheriff's, the jail already, once they become the county's inmate, they stop billing the city. If they got somebody that's in the hospital, he may be fine today, he may be in the hospital today, then they get the information filed, their medical expense stops today and ours begins today.
So you're saying we don't need any change in this language?
I'm not the lawyer.
I would say vote and pass it as it is, and then
I-
just amend it later if the attorney.
Well,
decides
how about
that
that one part, the other one, what was you talking about, that first line where it says in absence of a contract? Jeffrey, what was the first one you said about absent of a contract?
In 5.
Section 5, we start with in the absence of a written contract. You know, comma.
Kathy, I'm sorry I got crossed up. We were talking about contracts and daily rates and all that.
But on the good news, the juvenile situation is about to work itself out, we about got it figured out.
But my question on that, Jeffrey, is they're saying they have a contract that's written. So that's what.
You mean city is?
That we haven't agreed
I mean,
to.
that's going to be part of the fuss over this.
So what she's saying is the contract is null and void because they broke the contract.
I understand what she's
So if
saying.
we put that in here, now we're basically acknowledging that that contract is still valid, right?
If you believe-
Automatically renewed.
First of all, I don't know if the other contract's null and void or not. Start that off. Secondly, if the other contract is null and void, it doesn't sound like you have a written contract, and you might put it in there a valid written contract or a, you know, something along those lines. You know, the opening here is, I'm not sure if Connie was aware of the.
Right.
We have a, you know.
I think for right now, unless there's any objections, I think we should vote on it as it's written, and then we can amend it later after we discuss it with Connie and Jason, and just kind of see what the legal terminology best fits it. And at least it's in play, and we can actually use it. Because the attorney's already reviewed it, he already approved everything, so if we change it, we're changing things he's already approved. So
So you're talking to Jason?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
I make that motion, that we
I'll
recommend.
second.
Okay. Now, second.